piloting right now with a ton of different students. And the thing I love about this is that Cengage has done just an incredible job of understanding not only that this tool is something that we need to learn how to use, but also we need to learn to use it for students to help them. And so their new tool that they're piloting, when I first saw it as an instructional designer, I thought, oh my gosh, this is an incredible tool, because what it does is it doesn't give students the answer. I know a lot of you are worried about academic integrity. A lot of you said, I'm worried about students using AI for cheating. This is about using AI to build that durability, to build that grit with students. And so there's a really great video, and you're going to link for this for a second, and it's a student asking for what the answer is. And it's like, nope, sorry, I can't do that. I can't give you the answer. And it reminds me of some of my favorite sci-fi films, right, where they're trying to look into the future, do these things that they're not allowed to do. It's like, nope, sorry, I'm not programmed to do that. But this is a really cool tool, and I'm just so grateful that Cengage has taken the time to really say, hey, look, we're not going to run from this tool. We're going to use it to help you help your learners. Because remember that slide, 83% of faculty are saying, hey, we want some more support. And support comes in a lot of different ways. And I think this is a great way to do that. All right, so I've talked about building the hook, but the reality is this is just the beginning. The next part is even more important, which is then keeping them engaged, which I think is the hardest part. So, Flower, give us some tips on active learning.
Absolutely, I'm happy to do that. And while you both were being so eloquent, I literally joined. I know you can't see it very well, but I'm here on my phone, so I can see the slides this way. I tell you what, when we teach with technology, we have to have backup plans A, B, C, D, E, and F. So I'm gonna maybe not make quite as good eye contact as I usually like to try to make, because I'm checking these notes as well now. But here's what I can tell you about active learning. We learn by doing. We know that has been something that we have known since Aristotle, I believe, is the first person who kind of articulated that, or that we can give credit to. And I really like the way that Jim Lang talks about this, the author of Small Teaching, the originator of the small teaching concept. He says, what if we coached soccer the same way that sometimes we teach our large lecture classes? What if we had all the players sitting in the stands and we talked to them about how to kick the ball, how to dribble down the field, how to pass, and how to evade the opposition team, how to shoot the goal, right? What if we sat them in the stands and we told them all about that, but we didn't really let them out onto the field until the actual game? Well, that would be a terrible way to coach any sport, as I'm sure you would agree. So we need to provide opportunities for students to work with what they're learning. And I'll just say here briefly that we know that active learning makes a big difference in student pass rates, especially in STEM. It does create more inclusive environments and outcomes. But we also know that students are very busy people. So you can tell students, hey, you should quiz yourselves with flashcards, for example, but students may not actually get around to doing those things. So I really like to think about how we can structure opportunities for our students. We know that these, just as we were talking earlier about targeting our practice, that it really is important for students to practice the appropriate skills and not, for example, reread material that isn't as relevant. We need to help them figure out what are the ways that they can use their skills appropriately based on what they're learning. So let's assign learning activities based on what they are going to be able to do to practice that new information, and let's structure those activities as well. I have a couple of ideas here from artificial intelligence, ways of going about this. So here's a very simple one. And if you know me and my work, you know that I really love to incorporate small teaching approaches, which is really just things that are based in learning science that don't require a huge burden of time either in creating the activity or grading the activity. Maybe they don't take a lot of time during class, but they have an outsized impact on student engagement and learning because they're based on the science of learning. So this one is simply to ask ChatGPT, for example, to, I don't know what this slide says ChatGPT, but basically we can ask students to complete reading guides or video watching guides. It helps them stay focused, and it helps them organize that new information the way that we were talking about as well. We can also ask students to complete weekly quizzes. Again, you can tell your students you should quiz yourself, you should get into study groups, you should ask each other. Those are the very effective ways to study as opposed to reading and rereading, right? Really retrieving that information from where it is stored in long-term memory is far more effective because it strengthens the neural pathways. It makes that information easier to get to when we need it. But maybe students aren't going to get around to self-study in the way that we think is best. So I'm a real big fan of assigning weekly quizzes, not only to hold students accountable for doing the reading and the watching, but also to help them retrieve that information. And we can also, along this line, we can ask students to complete partial concept maps. And this is the idea, again, of helping students organize new information for themselves in their own neural networks. We cannot organize it for them. They have to create the organizational structures themselves. And providing them with a partial frame to fill out actually can really help them be effective in doing so. So as we think about, let's see, sorry, I'm just checking my notes. As we think about how students can, structure this kind of learning, it's about helping them to generate ideas, to write their own questions, to answer them for themselves. And now I think we can move quickly on to what we can do with AI to do some of these ideas. We can ask ChatGPT, which oftentimes I honestly think about as being kind of like a student worker or a teaching assistant. It helps me to think about it. Ask ChatGPT to create multiple case studies so that students can reference current events while they're practicing applying new concepts. We can also ask Google Notebook LM is a fascinating tool. If you haven't yet come across it, boy, it is mind-blowing. And one of the things that you can do with Google Notebook LM is to create a study guide with a click of a button. So all you do is upload your own materials, your own PowerPoints, your own lecture notes, and that way you are, again, ensuring the quality of the information. So Google LM can provide really great study guides as well. And Sean, I'm going to turn this back over to you to talk to us about how we can scaffold this learning experience for our students.
Great, thank you. So we talked about the hooks, bringing learning to life, and having our students actively engaged. The next thing we want to look at is how do we scaffold learning. And I think of scaffolding like on a building. It's not meant to stay there forever. It's meant to hold the structure up while you're working on it. And that's really what an instructor in a classroom does. We help our learners scaffold learning. So what is this? Well, what scaffolding learning does is we first of all try and understand what our students currently know about a topic so that we can build on that learning. I know sometimes I expect my students to know things that they don't. When they come in, they forgot, they haven't retained it in their long-term memory. I can't build on something that they don't understand. It's breaking really complex learning down into smaller chunks so that it's manageable, the learning is manageable. And another example is grouping students together to work on tasks and support each other. For those of you that have studied scaffolding, you probably are familiar with the idea that the instructor does it, the class does it, the group does it, and then the student does it. That's what scaffolding learning is. And why do we do this? Well, here's what the research says. And by the way, we've used about 25 sources for this presentation. There is a full works cited at the end, and you'll also get a handout with all of these. But here's what the research says. When we scaffold learning as instructors, the quality of students' work improves, and the content retention for students improves. And so I want them to remember and be able to apply and use what they're learning in my courses, and I want them to do it at a high level of mastery. I had Dolly 3 generate this, another AI tool, generate this image for me to try and give a picture in my mind of what scaffolding is. So if you think of knowledge, of books being knowledge, like a tree of life or like a tree of knowledge, the scaffolding is the structure that's around it as an instructor. It's the things that we're doing to help our students stay on task and build up. For example, if I assign a 10-page paper, that's really overwhelming to a lot of learners. But if I assign a lot of mini parts to that paper, it's much more manageable, and it also really enhances students behaving in ethical ways because they're not getting overwhelmed. They're much less likely to cheat. So let me give you some examples. And the way that I set mine up, I gave you an example of what I'm doing in my class, and then how I would use AI to assist. So one of the things that I do in my classes is I give pre-tests on the course as a whole, and then also as unit content, especially as we are building a starting place for learning. Now, let me be honest. Every semester, each of my classes are in different places, so I'm having to rewrite pre-tests every single time, and it takes a lot of time. So I have really leaned into doing pre-tests that are fun, like Kahoot. And I'm sure a lot of you use Kahoot already to do quizzing and prepare for midterms and that kind of thing. But you may not realize that Kahoot has an AI feature, so I can actually upload documents into Kahoot and it will create all the questions and the answers for me. That saves me a tremendous amount of time if I've just finished something and want to do a pretest on the next unit. I can also send this Kahoot out before class, that before class learning, and then I have all the data. How much does my class know as a whole? And I can even look at individual students. How much do they know? How am I building on this next set of knowledge? So this is a great way to let AI take some of the burden of the work off your shoulders. Here's a second strategy. When my students come in, they're learning how to annotate their chapters. They're learning how to discuss key concepts. They're learning how to try and figure out what's important in this chapter. And in my analogy, we might do the first chapter together. Or I may use something like my textbook in MindTap. And then I can leave my students Post-it notes, or I can highlight things for them. And then the next day, I'll have them do it together in class, and I'll give them some outlines or blanks with notes in it, and they have to fill it in as a group as they're going through together, which is wonderful. But again, it's very time consuming, and it takes a lot of my class times. So here's an AI tool that I found that I absolutely love, and I'm curious if any of you are using it. Put that in the chat and tell your peers how you're using it. We've got a couple people here at the university that are real advocates for this. Dr. Maura Grady and Dr. Richard Gray come to mind immediately. But almost any publisher text or PDF you can put into perusal. It is free. And what it allows students to do is to go in and read the text together and to annotate it together, to leave each other questions and comments and feedbacks. And in my classes, this is all before class starts. I'll record a short lecture. I'll make them listen to that. And then I'll say, now you're going to read the chapter. And I want you to comment in 3 different places in this chapter, something that related to the lecture that you read, or give original examples. And you must comment on your peers. And so you're saying, oh, this is kind of like a discussion board. It is, but it's the point of context in the textbook. And here's where AI comes in. It uses algorithms to grade the students' posts for me. So instead of giving a quiz or having the lecture stop and students answer a question, it uses these algorithms and it grades their responses, and it grades them on several, different things. It grades them on how involved they were. It grades them on how many posts they have. It grades them on how many times when you like a post, it gets bumped up to the top. How many times your posts were liked or bumped up. So it looks at all of these different algorithms to say, this might be a good grade. This is probably predictive of how much the student really uses. Now, for mine, they're very, very low stakes, 5 points. So I let AI grade their participation, but it really gets them in the chapter and not just answering a discussion board question. That makes it very easy to put that question into a tool and have it spit out an answer. They're really having to do the work here. And it's not taking up my class time. They're coming in with that knowledge level thinking already done so that we can move into that higher level thinking. All right, let me give you one last practical strategy with scaffolding. And I mentioned this in the beginning, breaking big projects down into smaller tasks. So for example, right now, my students are working on an informative speech, and we have 8 weeks until they deliver that speech. So if the example was a paper, I would break this down into your lit review is due on this day, and your outline on this day, and your first draft, and your second draft. And you must have a peer review it and provide those feedback. Now you must go to the writing center. Now you must have a final draft in. So I break this down, that scaffolding, and then they're getting feedback throughout. Well, here's a really great thing that ChatGPT can do for you. I put in my project and I will put the criteria in, I'll upload the criteria, and then I will ask it to break it down for me for multiple milestones throughout the semester. So this is what it produces for me. This was the one that I did for the 10-minute informative speech, and they're 8 weeks out. So I'm able to attach this right to the criteria for the project and say, this is a really great time management plan that we know a lot of students struggle with. In week 1, you should know your topic and you should have a plan for your research. In week 2, you should be doing this. And we're learning some of these things in class, but we're also moving on. But it doesn't matter what the time frame is. It could be the 7-day strategy to study for the midterm exam, right? Or I've put in before the 16-week strategy for studying for the final, with the idea that you need to review your notes every week and not just wait till the end and relearn it. And it will create these tools for me that I can share with the students. And of course, the best part, I can download it and then adjust and change and add and enhance so it becomes my work enhanced by AI. So that's scaffolding. Now, the next principle in our basics is what does it mean to be inclusive? And the reason that this is really important is this is really the foundation. All learning hinges on students feeling valued and wanted and included in the conversation. And Flower, your book talks a lot about this. Could you take the next acronym for us?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sean. And what I was thinking about during your great presentation on scaffolding is just how inclusive that in itself is, right? We know that our students come to us at different starting points, different level of readiness. But as Brian Dewsbury says, we need to dissociate readiness from capability. And so scaffolding in the kinds of ways that you just described really helps all students to upskill if needed, or to just do that work that's going to be able to help them. But you know, when I think more about inclusive learning, I like to think deeply about how emotion and cognition are intertwined. So here in academia, I think we're predisposed to think about the pursuit of knowledge as being purely rational. We're just pursuing information. There's no room for emotions. But recent neuroscience has shown that emotion and cognition are inextricably linked. And I've listed a couple of my favorite authors there, Kavanaugh and Imordino Yang, who are really doing a lot to help educators understand affective neuroscience. Because what happens is that if I am in your class and I am feeling worried about anything, believe it or not, the fight or flight response kicks in and it diverts the mental resources away from my ability to focus, pay attention, think, process, learn, and remember. And that fight or flight, even if it's a relatively low level of stress or anxiety, it diverts those resources and it leaves me less able to engage cognitively. So if I'm in your class and maybe I'm the first person in my family to go to college and I'm not really sure if I have what it takes, that level of anxiety in and of itself is going to hinder that student's ability to learn. We also know that when we can help students feel like they are in the right place, that they belong, that we are their place and these are their people, it really enhances learning outcomes and it helps those outcomes to be more equitable as well. So we want to create and sustain an environment that signals to our students that they are welcome, that they are included, that we see them, we value them. And you know, I've thought a lot about how challenging this is in large enrollment classes, for example. Students tell us they feel like a number. Certainly in asynchronous online classes, helping students feel like they belong can be challenging, but it's really critical for them to be able to do that. I like to think about this in terms of helping students to have voice and choice, and those align with what we know from universal design for learning as well. So I have 3 practical strategies to share with you today, and then I will talk through a couple of examples of how we might use AI to help us implement those practical strategies. First of all, again, helping students feel like we know something about them, helping them feel like we care about them as people and not just numbers or faces or names in our grade book. That is a really great way to help students feel included, right? So I like to think about asking students to share some information with a getting to know you survey at the beginning of class, maybe in the first week. You could even distribute that prior to the first day to give students an opportunity. And the way I like to structure a getting to know you survey is to ask students for some basic demographic information, maybe something about their major, their career goals, a hobby. But I also like to invite them, not require, but invite them to share anything else they want me to know about them. Maybe they're navigating a particular challenge this semester, or maybe they're really worried about my particular class. They don't feel confident. when we invite students to share any additional information that can help us, that is going to help students feel like they are included, respected, and valued. I also like to think about how we can get student feedback throughout the course. So in order to be an inclusive educator, it's vitally important to know how students are doing, but not just in terms of their grades or academic performance, it's also about how they're feeling, since emotions are so entwined with our ability to learn effectively. And one way we can do that is just by taking a midterm survey as an example. I like to think about the start, stop, continue. And I did this myself in my own class a couple of weeks ago. What are we doing that you would like us to stop doing in this class? What should we start doing to help you learn or feel more included? And what would you like us to continue doing? Just a way to gather some student input. You may need to establish some parameters, like, we're not going to stop preparing for our final exam. We're going to have that exam. We need to be ready for it. And it's also important to come back to the students as well and just explain, okay, here's what I saw. Here are some changes that I can make. And here are some changes that I'm not going to make, but I'll tell you why, so that you understand and see that motivational aspect of valuing those decisions as well. And then finally, this one's really powerful, and that is to assign metacognitive wrappers for tests, assignments, and projects. And this goes right back to this idea of students maybe feeling overconfident in their level of readiness before an exam. I know that I have sometimes received a grade on an exam that I took as a student, and I thought, oh, wow, I thought I did better than that. So what we can do is, again, structure opportunities, because we can tell students to do these things. They may not have time to do them. So structure an opportunity for students to reflect, for example. What grade did you think you were going to get on this exam? How did you study for the exam? Based on the grade that you actually earned, how might you do things differently? What might you do differently next time? And that kind of a sequence can be effective for a paper or written assignment. To pick up on Sean's example of breaking things down into tasks, you can ask students to reflect on their process, on their timing. Were they able to manage their time effectively in order to help their own learning? So when I think about inclusive practices with AI, one thing that comes to mind is using AI as an equity partner, which is something that I learned about from a book that I've been enjoying called Teaching with AI. I think we referenced that as well. And this is the idea of maybe asking, in this case, Claude, there it is, yes, maybe asking Claude to provide feedback. Where in these slides might I be excluding some students? Or where are those outdated references that students are not going to understand, to Karate Kid as an example? Help me see where I might be leaving students behind, or helping, inadvertently communicating to some students that they don't belong in this community. And then I also like to think about how we can ask ChatGPT to create a daily icebreaker. Maybe it's a warm-up activity that helps to introduce, the day's topic. I will tell you that currently I am teaching a class that is new to me. I'm teaching social psychology, and I use AI very, very frequently, almost on a daily basis. And one of the most common things I do is I say, give me a 5-minute icebreaker that students can complete in groups of 2 or 3. It should take into account that students are neurodivergent and have differing abilities and levels of confidence. Give me just a quick icebreaker activity. And that's one simple way that we can use these tools to help us create class activities, scenarios, case studies, and just really use those tools to help us to be more inclusive and help to signal to all students that they are welcome and respected. So Adam, now that we know that students are going to feel more valued in their learning community, how do we help them feel confident that they're on track with their learning?
Thank you so much, Flower. By the way, I love your ideas. I was mentally taking a lot of notes there. And one of the things I want to say too that I love that that Flower and Sean have done so well is that these ideas that are difficult, right? Like for Flower, for you to be teaching this new class, right? To not know this stuff like the back of your hand, right? To be able to go to AI as a starting point, I think is so important. I know that there's a lot of concerns about AI as a whole, and one of the great things if we just treat it like a first step, right? It's not the end. It's not the last response, it's the first response, and we can use that to help us get over that initial hump. So very, very well said. I love that. So one of the things that I find that's really difficult, especially at scale, is assessment. And we've got a lot of questions about academic integrity with the use of AI, and hopefully we'll be able to give you some proactive ideas here instead of reactive ideas. By proactive, I mean creating assessment that, like you said, Flower, makes students feel confident. It gives them opportunities to fail without the pain of really failing, right? But a way for them to check themselves before it's too late, right? So when we talk about consistent assessment, it's about evaluating progress throughout the semester and not necessarily performance. I think that's a really good distinction to make. And so going back to my favorite book, also named after my favorite play, Cats. We can see there's a lot of great opportunities to do that. But when we think about Cats classroom assessment techniques at scale, it can be really difficult for a lot of reasons. Number one, obviously creating them takes a lot of time, and then number two, assessing it, right? That can be really difficult as well. And so that one of the things that we're going to talk about is the opportunity to do practice problems. And so what I love about a practice problem, particularly a case study, and Flower has already talked about potentially using case studies as an active engagement tool, but a practice problem case study is where you go to AI and you basically say, hey, I need a case study, and then you provide it to learners, and learners actually have to submit something before they get an answer. And so that's the joy. I mean, every LMS has that kind of conditional type of thing where you say, hey, look, don't show this until they've uploaded something. So students have to actually write something out, and then they can actually get feedback. This is a great way for learners to be able to try something out, to kind of see how I did. And you also get that great cause and effect. I did something, I got something as a result of it. So let's take a look at this in terms of what this looks like in AI. And again, using Chat GPT with our prompt here, all you need to do is just put in a simple prompt like this. Now, it's very important that you know that I always try to be very kind with AI, kind of as a joke. And so I always like to say please and thank you. So can you please create something creative, a fun case study? And I needed to highlight these following concepts. Now, I've done this with the School of Veterinary Vet Medicine at Purdue. I've done this with the Electrical Computer Engineering Department at Purdue as well. And so this works all over the place. And it's incredible with what ChatGPT or any of these free scaffolding tools can come up with. And I believe Conmigo actually has a case study option as well. So thank you for nodding your head in agreement. So this is kind of the first thing it came up with. Look, it even comes with instructions. It gives you part one, and then of course it gives us that sample answer. And there's even more to it. This is just one small screenshot. The next slide shows you even more information here, giving all this information about this case study scenario where I'm asking students to think about how AI could be used to create a tutor. And again, the joy of this is that I'm not creating this. I'm using AI to help me start this from scratch. And so now I'm not worried if this necessarily goes out to the world, because at the end of the day, this is for them to check themselves. Now, another big thing that we see a lot is quizzing. And I think quizzing is really effective. One of the things I noticed is that you can very easily use ChatGPT uploading a captioning file, a PowerPoint, a PDF, whatever you want, and it will read that information and it will create a walled garden that just basically says, okay, I'm only going to pull quiz questions from this content that you've given me. And I use that to create mastery quizzes. Now, why do I do that? This is an example of one that I used from a captioning file. You can not only see that it gives me the 4 options and the correct answer, but it also gives me correct and incorrect feedback. Now, I have a couple different options. I can copy and paste this into my LMS. I can ask it to put it into an LMS-friendly CSV. There's a lot of different things that you can do. But I give my students unlimited time to take this quiz. And believe it or not, in a graduate level electrical and computer engineering course, we have students who take these quizzes upwards of 6 times. You know why? Because they want to get this information. Someone who takes a quiz 6 times is not using AI to find the answers, because psychologically you're saying, I trust you, but more importantly, I trust the process, and I want you to trust the process too. So by giving them these opportunities to take these quizzes over and over again, oftentimes these are ungraded. Sometimes we say, okay, fine, you can take this as many times as you want. We'll take the highest attempt, and it will only be worth 5% of your grade, but that's enough motivation to move them forward, because now they're not worried about the one chance they get to take an exam. And the piece of this is, some of you might say, well, this is really idealistic, but the piece of this that goes to the academic integrity is we're saying, no, we want to watch you through this progress. We want to support you through this process. And so by changing the stakes and making this lower stakes, you're taking advantage of the testing effect, which increases motivation and, of course, recall. So very exciting stuff. And again, this is already using information that we have. And so it's a very helpful tool. And hopefully you can see at scale, this is a great way to help learners evaluate progress and help them so they don't get to the midterm and say, oh my gosh, I didn't know this after all.
Yeah, Adam, I love that because you're giving us a lot of different options. I'll tell you, for those of you that are participants, I'm in love with Conmingo, which is made by Khan Academy because it has like 50 different options. So I want a case study, I want a quiz, I need an icebreaker activity, I want a hook to get my students involved, and then you put the level, the topic, and it gives you some really great things. And everything that's in Conmingo it pulls from data created by educators. So I worry less about incorrect data or hallucinations or data that's not inclusive and so on. So thanks for that. I'm going to wrap us up with the S. And the S is strategic feedback. And all of my educator friends on here know this is what takes us the longest amount of time as a great educator, is to give individual feedback to students to help them understand what they're doing well, what they need to work on, how they need to work on specific things. And if you're like me, I'm sure more than once on your course evaluations, a student has said, I didn't get any feedback. And you've literally worked your heart out to write notes on their papers or put things in their LMS. So strategic feedback is key, but I am certainly aware of the amount of time that it takes. So when I'm looking to AI, I'm looking at how can I give students consistent feedback that will enhance what I'm doing. Here's what the research tells us. The reason students need consistent feedback is that it improves their learning. They will learn more and they will master the concepts if they get consistent feedback at strategic times. It can't be at the end of the semester. It has to be in a place that they can improve what they're doing. And the other thing is peer feedback, that peer-to-peer learning is incredibly important, both in students learning and retaining information, but also in building self-efficacy. Their belief that they can be successful, that they do understand it, that they know it. So providing clear guidelines, giving specific detailed feedback, engaging peers in the activities. These are all ways that we give strategic feedback. So let me give you 3 things that I do and 3 ways that AI is enhancing what I do in the classroom. So the first thing, and I'm sure this is nothing new to most of you, when I have big projects, I always include detailed rubrics that align directly with the learning outcomes of the project. And I give them to the students right on the very first day when I assign it. And that way they understand the mastery level for each part of the assignment as they're moving forward. And hey, if a student is okay with the C, that's okay with me if that's what they want to work for, but they know what they have to do to get at that level of mastery, what an A mastery looks like. It also makes grading much easier because I'm grading across a consistent criteria. Now, rubrics take time to develop and they take time to develop well. So here is an AI strategy. We use at Ashland University Blackboard Ultra, and we have an great AI tools in there. They'll summarize the whole module for me and put an overview in. But one of the things is any assignment that I do, it will create a rubric for me. And I say how many categories. I can adjust the scale to say this is a 100 level course, this is a graduate course, this is the first course they'll have taken, this is a course they should scaffold knowledge on. And it will create an entire rubric for me. I will adjust it, change the points, read you some words, but then when I grade the paper in the LMS and I click on one of these boxes, you're developing in this, you're proficient in this, it only pulls that feedback up in so they can see how they scored on that. They've got the whole rubric, and then I can put my individual feedback. It has saved me a tremendous amount of time in grading. I allow my students to respond to my feedback for additional points because I know that's where the learning comes when they come in and they look at what they did and what they might do differently. Which leads me to probably my favorite thing that I do in my classes, and it's called double exam. I'm sure some of you do this. It comes from this great book, Learner-Centered Teaching by Mary Ellen Weimer. I was in a faculty learning community, and I learned about this book. But one of the strategies that she did is she said, after your midterm exam or after a test, instead of having students do test corrections or telling them what they missed, do double exams. So the day after my exams, the next day when they come into class, I say, put all your notes away, you're taking the exam again, but this time in groups. So I have them retake the midterm examination in groups, and they debate every answer. Do we have this one right? I give them one, phone a friend. They don't know what Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is, but I'm their friend. So if they have something they can't come to a conclusion on, they can phone me and I'll come over and help them. And it's for extra credit points on the exam. If they get every single question right, they get 3 extra credit points on their exam. They miss one, they get 2. They miss 2, they get 1. If they miss more than 3 questions, no extra credit. I will tell you consistently on my evaluations, this is the one thing that stands out that they say they learned the most. Because they're sitting there going, no, remember Dr. Orr used this example. And they're like, how could I forget that? But here's the way AI has made this better for me. So when I do this, there's always concepts everybody knows and concepts more people struggled with. So what I've been doing is when I do my double exam, I put my exam into ChatGPT and then I say, rewrite this exam, but put more emphasis, add more questions on these things. So this was actually from my midterm exam I gave. So several students didn't get the definition of communication right. They really could not differentiate regulative rules, and they didn't know the types of power and groups. So this is what it came out for me. It gave me a whole new exam to do double exam on, and it put more emphasis on the concepts that particular class didn't know. So it just enhanced this activity that we were doing. Let me give you my one last strategy for this as we wrap up, and this is using an AI coach. So there are a lot of AI coaches. There's a lot of research about the efficacy. And of course, this is emerging research, right? AI as a readily available tool for us is only a few years old. But I teach public speaking. So my students, I know they get better by practicing and getting feedback, good feedback, right? And it's the reason evaluating is at the very top of Bloom's taxonomy. It is hard to evaluate somebody else and give them good feedback, right? So in my classes, I use Bongo. It's built right into my textbook. And what students can do is they give their speech, and then AI evaluates their speech based on a bunch of criteria. And it says, here's the things that you seem to do well. Here's the things that you probably need to continue to work on. And then they can do their speech again, and it gets a whole nother set of criteria. And it looks at things like delivery, like fillers and speaking rate and inclusive language. It also looks at content. It looks at how many citations they give. It looks at eye contact. It looks at all of these things that I would evaluate students on. And I have several days that they can come into the classroom and practice their speeches in front of me. But when you have 120 students a semester, I can't be there for 2 weeks solid to listen to speeches, to listen to practice speeches. They can do this 5 or 6 times, and AI gives them their feedback. When it's my online classes, I have them do this, and then they can elect which version they want to submit for me to grade. So they may do it 10 times and then pick their best version, but they get some really outstanding feedback from this. Now, I do just want to mention, there's a lot more AI coaches that are out. There's a lot of research, emerging research. This was an article, you may have seen it, from Harvard, and it was looking at the impact of these AI coaches. And this in particular was looking at maker spaces in this study, because we know when students are in maker spaces, they need a lot of encouragement, they need a lot of feedback to pursue. And this is what their study found. They found that an AI coach does a good job at using supportive language, at valuing the strategies that they came up, but it needed a large class size and a lot of information to provide actually really good feedback. And what they found is that it can't replace the feedback that the human gives. And that's what I said at the very beginning of this presentation. We can never replace the feedback a great instructor gives. But when we're doing group projects, I can't be at every single table all the time. If I can use an AI coach, they can be getting feedback so that when I'm there, I can enhance and supplement that feedback. So those are 3 ways that I'm using AI. I will tell you, this study ended and they said something really brilliant. I had to write it down. It said, embracing AI in the classroom is a way for teachers to gain firsthand understanding and model its use for learning. And I think that's really the key. When I use AI, I always tell my students, I used AI to develop this case study. I used AI to do this. AI helped me rewrite this exam, because I have a lot of assignments that I encourage AI use, and I have other assignments that make restrictive, because I want them to struggle through the learning process. So I make sure that in my own self, I always tell them when I use AI why I used it and how it enhanced the product that I'm producing for them. So we have just about 3 minutes left. So Adam, why don't you wrap up the basics for us real quick?
Thank you, Sean. And by the way, we did have a couple questions about what's the tool name in Blackboard Ultra for creating rubric? It's just called Rubric Creator.
Oh yeah, it's Rubric Creator. It's right in Blackboard Ultra. When you put in an assignment, it'll say right on the right hand side, do you want to create a rubric?
Awesome. Thank you, Sean, so much. Yeah. So I think in a nutshell, in the 30-second conclusion here is when we talk about going back to basics, what we're saying is we're relying on the time-tested research that Flower did an incredible job of summarizing for us, right? To make learning durable, right? To help learners engage in a gritty kind of way. But at the same time, we need to take into account the fact that we can't do all this on our own. Not all of these things all at once for every learner in all our courses, and that we can rely on the tool that is AI to leverage learning when it's appropriate, when it's thoughtful, and I think most importantly, in an inclusive way. And so it's really important. What we try to do throughout this entire workshop is say, look, AI is here, just like the internet is here, just like smartphones are here, and it's our job to really use it in a meaningful way, so that not only so that we can leverage learning, but we can also help learners understand its utility, right? Because just like we said, educators are looking to higher ed saying, hey, we need more support, and our students are looking to us saying the same thing. And so we hope that we've done a really good job today of saying, look, these are the options that are available. Look at all these great tools. Go play around with it and try it out.
Great, thanks, Adam. So as we wrap up here, if you all would put in the chat, what's one thing you're excited to try in your own classes next semester, or even in the remainder of this semester? I know we have 6 weeks left. What's one thing you're hoping to incorporate into your classes and try? And I'll ask my friends on here. Adam, let's start with you. What's one thing you're hoping to try?
Well, actually, so I got to go into Conmigo more. You just showed it to me last week, and I'm just amazed at all the options. So that's the first thing I'm going to be going into is using Conmigo.
Okay, great. Flower, what about you?
I love the idea of using AI to create additional examples or questions or case studies based on where the students are sort of struggling, right? Your idea from the double exam, and then that can be expanded to just, here's where people are struggling, here's a bottleneck, help me create more of these things. Love that.
Great. I was originally going to say Conmingo, but now I've decided to change my answer to Flower's example with uploading your lecture notes and to say, is there some place in here that I'm not being inclusive? Is there some place in here I'm using language that's not inclusive, or examples that are too one-sided? So I really like that idea of my own continued learning. So I'll be excited to look at the chat and hear the things that all of you, Flower and Adam, thanks for being just really great co-presenters in this. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure our presenters did as well. I'm going to just flip through these so that everybody realizes we do indeed have a works cited page. We tried to put those on the slides, but we have all of the sources and all of the books and everything, and you will be getting a copy of all that. So thanks so much for joining us today, and I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, all three of you, for such an insightful and packed with all kinds of suggestions. I love all the comments that are going on in chat. I love the idea, and several people indicated they love the double exam idea, which no student loves exams, but I can see the real power and impact of that approach along with everything else. So just to remind everyone, thank you for your participation in chat, which was quite active. The PowerPoint slides, the cited works, and the recording will be posted to cengage.com/empowered-educator. That'll be next week. You as an attendee and a person registered for this conference, you will also get that email to you. Along with those who attended today will get a certificate of participation. So be looking for all of those. And last but not least, some of you have asked if this is a series of webinars. This is not, but we do have a 2-day conference coming up in February, Empowered Educator Online Conference. Be looking in early January for that registration page to go live. Again, that'll be at cengage.com/empowered-educator. And we have, during that 2-day conference, we have 2 keynotes, Corbin Campbell, who some of you may know her name as well, from ACUE, which Flower, you came to us as a reference and a recommendation from ACUE. Thank you for your participation here, as well as Corbin's keynote in February, as well as Matt Larson, who is at the University of California, Los Angeles. He's a senior instructional designer, and he's also a keynote, along with 16 other concurrent sessions from peers just like you. So be looking for that. And the theme for the conference is going to be Reaching Today's Learner, Impactful Teaching Practices in Higher Ed. Some of the sessions are on AI, some are completely not AI related, but they are all impactful ways of improving learning in higher ed, which is what today's session was all about. Thank you, Flower, thank you, Sean, and thank you, Adam, for all of your time and effort and for everyone's participation today. We appreciate it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Now I can double.
How many rates and different things looking at how much is higher education, how much is using AI in the master. And if you look at the middle of it, it says about 40% happening on using AI in support of the courses. It's not 15, 60% are using it just in a role. Right now, 40% on the top, and then 60% and the students are maybe still a little bit concerned about. If you also look at 65% of faculty only comfortable using AI at all, it's something that's really interesting. You look at a picture on the right, only 15% of faculty just use any kind of training implementing AI in the course. So we're not talking about things like chatbots or the answer reward or different. How do you use it in your course? Only 60% of faculty saying 83% of faculty saying I have a 83% of faculty saying it's very little using AI in the institution as a whole. So it's very much in the
Yes.
Okay, can I talk to you for a
Yes.
second? FPNL called me
Uh-huh.
from vegetation,
Right.
and they just wanted to let me know that leaves or branches that are on black cables
Uh-huh.
are not their business.
Uh-huh.
It's only the silver wires that are above that. And if the vegetation is on black wires,
Uh-huh.
they don't take care of it. But they'll, so I told them it's not on black wires. So maybe they'll come. You know, they're supposed to come, but I'm just letting you know.
White one.
But those black wires, it's not,
It's all right. Don't worry about it.
don't worry, and then I don't think, don't even bother with them. You know,
If they
man,
want.
they can come. So I said, let them call me, because I can't assure that they'll call you.
Fine.
You know what I mean? It's not
Yes.
even.
Now I add the summary. I paste the notes in the summary.
Okay, so you have salads here if you want to eat,
Then I
okay?
scroll down
I'm
fine.
going to my class, okay?
All right. I'll see you later.
Yeah.
Scroll down. I save it. So now I have chapters. And I want to add tags also. So I click the tag button. And I add the batch tag. Then I add the videos tag. Then I add the lanyard tag. I got 3 tags. That will be good enough for now. I'll go back to the top of my notes. I want to make sure that I put the copy the Loom video file name in my SAR file. So I paste it in the highlight area and comment. And now I will refresh it and I will add it also into the file name itself. So I have in the file name not only my video file names from MSN Recorder Max, but also, which is a local recording, a local video recording. I will have also the cloud recording from Loom. I will have the URL. Trouble is that the URL contains characters that Microsoft does not allow in a file name, so I'll have to modify it a little. So I'm going to paste it in at the end. And then Control V to paste. And then I'll modify it by replacing the prohibited characters like colon and slashes by dashes. And otherwise, I'll keep it intact more or less so I can easily regenerate it. Now this will be version J after I. And then the current time is 3:21. Well, the problem is it becomes too long. So I want to trim it a little bit.
Probably it's perfect. It's training.
Fine.
Got it?
Yeah. Delete some extra characters. And they're repetitive. Then we'll try to insert it again. Now the length is fine. I can copy to the clipboard buffer, save it, and then review additional details. See that was step number 44 at the end. As I start the last one, add a comment to the previous psr.exe file name. Then OK. Then paste it in my notes. After the close parentheses, file save in Notepad. Repeat it again in WordPad. I want to shut down the video recording and play it back to test it. So we'll start with Cyberlink first.